To understand the origin of Agile methodology and why it's important, let's first look at what's called a complete software development lifecycle, which involves all these roles that we mentioned at the beginning. Now let's see what are the responsibilities of those roles within the software development lifecycle using an example of a more complex application like Facebook, for example. And then we'll see how the applications were developed before Agile workflow and what were the challenges that led to the introduction and the popularization of Agile and Scrum. This is the most common use case where we need all these different roles. For example, an application that is developed by a big company. In this case, let's take an example of Facebook. It is a pretty complex application and it will probably require all of those different IT roles and responsibilities in order to make the whole Facebook development process possible. So first, let's start with the programming. So Facebook is basically a software, an application that needs to be developed by developer team. So on a higher level, developers code the application in various different programming languages. Developers work in teams. If it's a small application, then you would have one team per application. If it's a huge application like Facebook, you will have multiple teams probably per feature. So for example, a Facebook Messenger will have its own development team. Maybe the business side or the business features of Facebook application will have its own team and so on. And these are the people who write code for creating new functionalities in the application. But also, if something doesn't work in the application, they also fix those issues. So once the development process is done, so to say, the feature is developed and it's functioning, the next step is to test the application. If you have an existing complex application where you add new features and fix bugs all the time, of course, it's important to make sure that the code changes didn't break the existing functionalities. So that when Facebook releases a new version, you can still log in, you can still chat, upload pictures, and everything else works as well. And the testing is done at various different points, all right? The developers, they test the code themselves, and there are also people that manually test new features and bug fixes, etc. However, you can imagine how much effort it could be to test an application as huge and complex as Facebook, especially if you have so many features and you are adding new ones all the time. So because of that, not to have this repeating testing process, there are automated tests. So instead of people testing the application, there are programs that are testing the application. So it's a code that tests the code, so to say. So once the testing process is successful, the application can be released. So let's say a new feature was added to Facebook, developers finished the development, they tested it locally, they checked that everything works in the code, nothing is broken, then a bigger layer or a higher level testing is done to make sure that nothing was broken and everything works in combination. The automated tests ran, and now it's time to show that new feature to the users, right? So kind of roll it out to the whole world as a new feature. And that process is basically the release process of the application. And in order to release an application, you have to build that application, meaning package it into a compressed code and then run it on servers, right? Of course, in case of Facebook application is already running on multiple different servers. So basically when a new feature gets added, that feature needs to be added to that running code. So basically the application needs to be updated or upgraded. And this is where the part of operations comes in, right? Operation is a team, or IT operations is another part of the software development and delivery lifecycle that is in charge of running software in production. So in this case, the IT operations will be responsible for taking that new feature and running it successfully on the existing production servers so that new users can get access to it. Now, one thing that heavily influences the speed and the overall process of how software development and delivery actually happens inside an organization is the methodology or the way that organization is actually developing the applications. What do I mean by that? Traditionally, there was this concept or a methodology of developing software called waterfall method. So waterfall basically would mean, again, if we go back to the example of Facebook, let's say if the team was developing Facebook from scratch, the very first features, they would make a plan of how the application or how the Facebook application would look like with a list of every possible feature, the messaging, events, creating groups and pages and uploading pictures. So basically every specific feature listed and documented. Then a development team would take that huge list of application features and their documentation of how the business people envisioned it and start developing one feature at a time. So developers would go for a month basically just coding and adding new features and new functionalities. And once the development process of the whole entire application was done, the application would then go to the testing department. So testing department would go through each and every feature one by one and test their functionality, do load testing, do performance testing, and so on. Of course, they would find some bugs or some mismatches, so to say, between the documentation and the execution or the implementation of the features. They would send those improvement tasks back to the development team. Development team would go through each one of the improvement tasks on the list. Again, takes a month to improve the application, transfer it to the testing department. They would go through the same cycle of testing everything. And obviously this would produce a couple of cycles. And once the testing and development was completed, they would push the application over to the operations saying, here's the application, it's tested, you can now deploy that. So operations team will create these huge preparation tasks and work a couple of months or maybe again years in order to prepare the infrastructure to run the whole application. Obviously, some problems would arise because some parts of the application wouldn't run. There will be, again, back and forth with the development team and so on. So maybe after a couple of years, the application was ready and deployed and running. Now, this may sound like a tedious, long, and very ineffective process, and it was and is in most of the cases, especially when developing such complex applications, especially considering that the application development or features may evolve over time based on new demands or maybe what the users want, etc. And obviously a lot of companies realized that this method was ineffective in a lot of ways because it created so many places of failure along the process and so many opportunities for miscommunications and misunderstandings between the teams and not allow for quick and fast feedback. So as an alternative to the waterfall method, a very extreme methodology was developed, which is called Agile methodology for software development, which is actually pretty popular and is becoming increasingly popular across organizations and companies. And the main benefit or the thing that it solves is the speed of development, testing, and deploying cycles. So basically, instead of just waiting there to develop the whole application start to finish by checking off each feature and bug fix and so on, basically each new feature gets tested, deployed, and there's an immediate feedback if there is some bug in that feature or if the deployment doesn't work, etc. And the Agile methodology actually allows for a more dynamic, fast, and also easily changeable development and deployment process. And since Agile is just a methodology or a framework that just tells you, so to say, what are the good practices and efficient ways to do things, it has specific implementations of that framework. One of them being Scrum and another one is Kanban. And depending on the company and the team and their needs, they may be working with one of the frameworks. So Agile is basically a practice that helps develop an application with continuous short iterations. So it breaks down the whole application into smaller chunks, and these small chunks can be developed, tested, and then validated by the customer in shorter iterations. This means it's easier and faster to make changes while developing the application. It's easier and faster to find any issues and revert them or fix them. And it gives you a lot of flexibility in your application development process. Unlike the waterfall method, in Agile, development, testing, and deployment all happen in parallel, which needs a lot of communication between respective roles. So Agile also encourages a lot of teamwork and communication, but not only inside the team or within the team, but outside as well. Like the customers who actually ordered the creation of the application, as well as developers, the business decision makers in the company must all work together to develop a product. So in practice, it will look something like this. A feature gets developed, tester takes over and tests that feature. If it's fine, the operations can already work on deploying it. At the same time, developers can already start working on the next feature. When the first feature gets deployed, customers or end users can give feedback to the feature. If it's fine and the customer is happy with the result, then the feature is done or completed. If the customer or the end user wants any changes, those changes can go back to the list of tasks and be implemented by the developers, and the task will then go through the same process of being developed, tested, deployed, getting customer feedback, where customer is either happy with the final result or wants another adjustment and another change. So in Agile, we're developing a product in small cycles and increments, which again, as I mentioned, helps being flexible as well as makes sure that we're developing exactly what the customer wants. And if it's not what the customer wants, we know about this immediately on the very first feature. And Scrum is one of the implementations of Agile methodology in which those incremental builds are delivered to the customer in every 2 to 3 weeks time. You can also think of Scrum as a project management system that delivers software in small increments in 2 or 3 week cycles, also called sprints. And the goal of each sprint is to build the most important features first. More features are added to the application in the next sprints, and the already implemented features are adjusted based on the customer feedback from the previous sprints. Now, obviously, there is so much you can implement during one sprint, which is 2 weeks or 3 weeks period of time, right? You can't build the whole application and all its features within that time. So when the team plans what features need to be developed, what bugs need to be fixed, what changes or adjustments to existing features need to be made, not all of them can be done at once, right? So the list gets prioritized before each sprint to decide what is the most important next changes in the application for the customer that development team can work on in the next sprint. And the list of tasks which the team prioritizes after each sprint is also called a backlog. So that's basically all the tasks, fixes, adjustments, etc. that need to be done at some point. And at the end of every sprint, when the team sits down to plan for the next sprint and decide what goes into that next sprint, basically that backlog, that list of tasks gets prioritized, and the top tasks that end up in the backlog are planned to be implemented in the following sprint. And since in Agile and Scrum workflow, the development is flexible and based on customer feedback, the features and requirements may change often, which means the backlog, respectively, gets reviewed to see did any tasks become irrelevant because customer decided they don't want it anymore, or did new tasks appear, so customer decided to add new features, or do any existing tasks actually need adjustment because customer decided they don't want it implemented that way, so they need to make some changes. So team sits together during the sprint planning and makes those changes to clean up that backlog. Within the Scrum itself, there are 3 core roles. You have the Scrum Master, Product Owner, and the Scrum team. And all of these people are committed to the Scrum project. The Scrum Master is someone that makes sure that Scrum workflow, or that specific implementation of Agile methodology, which is Scrum, is properly implemented by the team. And Scrum Master also supports the team when they get stuck or things get slow, and basically helps the team solve any issues in their workflow. So for example, if the team doesn't know how to divide the work, or if they are missing some know-how, or if there is some conflict within the team, or the most common example probably, if there is some issue with the communication either within the team or between the team and the customer, etc. So Scrum Master is basically responsible for identifying any such issues and helping developers or the development team solve those issues. And the way Scrum Master actually identifies most of these issues that the team may have is during different Scrum meetings. So Scrum Master is also responsible for holding daily meetings with the Scrum team. So every single day, the team gets together in a short meeting to mention any issues that some individual team members may be having, or if they have any issue or problem with their current task. So that's basically the responsibility and role of a Scrum Master. Then we have the product owner, which I mentioned at the beginning. The product owner represents customers and their wants and their needs. So you can think of a product owner as an intermediary between the Scrum team and the customer, with the final goal that the development team develops exactly what the customers want. So product owner, being part of the Scrum team itself, makes sure that the Scrum team actually delivers value to the customers. They define exactly how the product should look like, how it should function, what features it will have, and they are the ones actually who add tasks to the backlog. So they are the ones deciding what needs to be done and also makes continuous and regular adjustments to the backlog as needed based on the feedback from the customer. Product owner is also the one that takes the lead in prioritizing those tasks in the backlog and deciding what needs to be developed in the next sprint. And finally, we have Scrum Team, which is a self-organized group of people who have different backgrounds, such as software development, testing, design, operations, etc., to actually implement the project and do the tasks and produce deliverable products. And members of the Scrum team self-administer tasks and also share responsibility for the sprint's goals. So you don't have this typical traditional manager role here that kind of decides what the team should do. It is really a self-managed team where every team member takes responsibility for meeting the goals of each sprint. And finally, in Scrum, you have these kind of secondary roles, which are everyone else involved in the project. And this could be the management of the company, different people from the customer side, members of the executive team, and so on. So basically, people who are not directly involved in implementation, but they need to give some input or feedback or in some way contribute to the project from outside. And going back to the online tools that I mentioned at the beginning that enable teams to actually work with those workflows like Scrum workflow and to implement Scrum in their project. And one of those popular online tools being JIRA. JIRA actually has features that let you use Scrum in your project. For example, in JIRA, you can create a Scrum board and have a backlog of tasks that need to be implemented in the project, as well as create sprints for your team. And within that sprint, you actually have a visibility of what tasks are planned for that sprint, which one of those tasks are in progress, which ones are done and completed, and who is working on what. And in the next section, we will see that in action, where we learn how to create a Scrum board, how to create a backlog and plan a sprint, and then see how all that actually works in practice.